The sky over Veltra 9 rippled with unnatural light. Streaks of silver and violet tore across the upper atmosphere as the Galactic Empire's fleet broke orbit. Their ships, sleek wedges of obsidian alloy, glowed with an arrogance as palpable as their commanders' voices echoing across open channels. "Primitive humans," Commander Varix Tal announced, his words broadcast on every frequency. "Your colony is an embarrassment. Your resistance will be erased. Consider it mercy that your extinction will be swift." On the sand-choked ridgeline outside the human outpost, Captain Marcus Hale lowered his binoculars. 34 years had carved early lines of weariness across his face, but his eyes carried a steady, razor-sharp calm. His troops weren't calm. A dozen soldiers in mismatched armor shifted nervously, staring up at the Imperial fleet blotting out the stars. "Does he practice sounding that smug?" Private Kellen muttered, "or does it just come natural?" The remark drew weak chuckles. Fear still clung to the air like static. Hale didn't smile. "Fear's fine," he said, adjusting the strap of his rifle. "Fear means you know the odds. What matters is what you do in spite of it." The comm unit buzzed at his hip. A familiar voice, Lieutenant Mora, his second, cut in. "Marcus, we've counted 6 dropships incoming. Heavily armed. They're spreading their landing zones across the plains. No way we can outgun them with plasma rifles alone." "Didn't think we'd win a straight fight," Hale replied. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but every syllable was weighed. "Buy me 3 minutes in the depot. Keep the men steady." He headed for the supply bunker at the heart of the settlement. The structure was crude steel welded onto native stone, barely worthy of being called a fortress. Inside, racks of modern weapons lined the walls. Pulse rifles, plasma grenades, shoulder-mounted rail carbines. Standard issue. Not nearly enough to hold back an army. But beyond the racks, behind a door marked archival storage, restricted, lay the one crate that had haunted Hale's thoughts since the day he'd found it gathering dust. He keyed in the override, stepped inside, and pulled away the tarp. The weapon beneath was ancient, an artifact of Earth's bloody past. Long steel barrels mounted in a rotating cluster, feeding from a drum that looked laughably mechanical compared to sleek plasma clip. A brass plate was bolted to the side, etched with a name that once carried weight. Gatling gun, 19th century replica, functional. When Hale first found it, he'd laugh. The thing belonged in a museum, not on a battlefield 28 centuries later. But now, facing an empire whose arrogance made them blind, he realized the value of a weapon that defied expectation. Lieutenant Mora stormed into the room, helmet tucked under her arm. Her eyes widened at the sight of the weapon. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious," Hale said. He ran a hand along the barrels, almost reverent. "They think they know everything about us. They think war is about tech. But sometimes, all you need is raw, mechanical brutality." Mora's voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "Marcus, it's a museum piece. How many rounds does it even have? Enough to send a message." He lifted the lid of a smaller crate, revealing belts of gleaming brass cartridges, polished and oiled. A century-old shipment meant for display, not deployment. But still deadly. Outside, the ground thundered as the first Empire dropships slammed onto the plains. Hale could hear the rhythmic pounding of alien war drums, the Legion-like theatrics, another arrogance they'd carried across the stars. Over the comm, Varix Tal's voice echoed again, smooth and venomous. "Surrender now, humans, and perhaps your labor may be spared. Resist, and you'll be wiped from memory. Your weapons are obsolete, your tactics laughable." Hale slung the Gatling's heavy frame over a grav sled and started hauling it toward the fort's outer wall. "Obsolete," he muttered, almost amused. "We'll see." The soldiers on the wall parted in stunned silence as he wheeled the weapon into place. The gun looked monstrous beside their sleek rifles, its spinning barrels archaic yet somehow menacing. Private Kellen broke the silence first. "Sir, That thing belongs in a black and white war reel. Hale's grin was brief, sharp. And in 5 minutes, it'll belong in the nightmares of every alien out there. Laughter broke the tension, nervous but real. The kind of laughter soldiers cling to before battle. On the horizon, shimmering ranks of Imperial infantry marched in precision. Hundreds of tall, armored figures with shields glowing blue, plasma rifles bristling in perfect unison. Behind them, bipedal walkers stomped forward, each step shaking the sands. Their confidence was palpable, the disdain clear in every mocking chant that echoed across the desert. Lieutenant Mora leaned close, voice low. If this fails, Hale interrupted, then we were already dead. At least this way, they'll remember we didn't roll over. The Gatling gun clicked as he fed the first belt into the chamber. The sound was oddly satisfying, a mechanical growl from humanity's violent past. Over the comm, Commander Varric spoke once more, his voice thick with disdain. What are you doing, Captain? Rolling out a relic? A toy from your barbaric history? Do you think iron and powder will halt plasma and steel? Hale toggled his mic, eyes never leaving the approaching enemy lines. You'll find out soon enough. The alien commander laughed, cold and condescending. It was the last laugh he would enjoy that day. The human defenders crouched low along the ridgeline. Fingers tightened on triggers. Hearts pounded. The Empire advanced in perfect formation, shields blazing bright in the twilight. Hale wrapped his hand around the Gatling's crank. The ancient beast hummed as it spun once, barrels rotating with a metallic snarl. The sound carried over the sands, alien soldiers pausing for the first time, frowns cutting through their arrogance. Sir, Private Kellen whispered, awe creeping into his tone. That doesn't sound like a toy. Marcus Hale didn't answer. His eyes narrowed on the first rank of the Empire's advance. The world seemed to still. Every heartbeat stretched into eternity. He spoke softly, words only his soldiers could hear. Let's show them why you never mock human history. The barrels spun faster, the gun roaring alive. The chapter ended in the instant before thunder. White heavy checkmark. The silence shattered into a storm. The Gatling gun erupted with a guttural roar, the barrels spinning into a blur as brass casings spat onto the sand in a glittering cascade. Each rotation delivered a torrent of lead, cutting through the desert air with a scream of mechanical fury. The sound was alien to the Empire soldiers, a raw thunder unlike the sterile hum of plasma rifles. The first rank of Imperial infantry, shield emitters glowing, marched forward confidently, until the rounds hit. Energy shields that shrugged off plasma fire crumpled like glass. Slugs tore through armor, punched holes in torsos, shredded limbs. In an instant, the neat formation dissolved into chaos. Private Kellen stared wide-eyed from behind the barricade. Holy hell, it's chewing through them. Lieutenant Mora didn't answer. Her jaw clenched as she watched shields collapse under the storm of bullets. It was slaughter. On the horizon, Commander Varric's Tal's holographic feed flickered with static as screams bled into his channels. His eyes widened, disbelief cracking his mask of arrogance. What is this? What weapon is this? Hale's voice carried calm steel. This is history. He didn't look up, hands steady on the crank as the barrels kept spinning, the old machine shrieking its deadly hymn. The Empire had relied on energy-based combat for centuries. Shields tuned to plasma, armor designed to deflect heat and radiation, none of it built to withstand high-velocity metal tearing into flesh. That blind spot had never mattered until now. The second wave tried to fan out, but the Gatling's cone of fire swept across them like a scythe. Soldiers screamed in alien tongues as their ranks collapsed, green ichor and sparks staining the sands. Walkers lumbered forward, their armored plating gleaming. Hale shifted fire, focusing the storm into the nearest machine's knee joint. Bullets hammered relentlessly until metal shrieked and hydraulics burst. The walker staggered, groaned, and collapsed, crushing its own troops beneath its weight. Reload. Hale barked, the gun's barrels slowing as the first belt rattled empty. 2 soldiers scrambled forward, hands fumbling to slam in the next chain of brass cartridges. The momentary lull allowed scattered Imperial rifles to fire, blue streaks of plasma slamming into the barricades. One beam grazed a defender, the man screaming as molten slag seared his arm. "Keep your heads down!" Mora shouted, dragging the wounded soldier to cover. The belt clicked in. Hale's hand tightened on the crank and the Gatling roared again. A fresh stream of lead carved across the battlefield, silencing plasma fire mid-burst. Kellen risked a glance over the barricade. "They're falling back. They don't know what to do." He was right. The once perfect formation of Empire soldiers had collapsed into disarray. Some dropped shields, others scrambled for cover that didn't exist. The arrogance of invincibility was gone, replaced with something rawer, older, fear. Hale's voice carried over the storm. "Let them run. Every corpse they leave behind tells the galaxy what happens when you mock humans." Commander Varrix's image flickered on comms again, his composure fraying. "This is impossible. You should not have this power." His words trembled between rage and denial. Hale allowed himself the faintest smirk. "Power? Commander, this isn't power. This is just brass and lead. We've had it for over 1,000 years." The Gatling's barrels spun faster, spitting death into another squad that had attempted to flank. They didn't last 5 seconds before the line disintegrated. In the chaos, one Imperial officer shouted orders, trying to rally a countercharge. His troops hesitated, their once iron discipline cracking under the relentless thunder. Hale shifted aim, cut the officer down mid-command, and watched panic ripple outward as his soldiers broke. Lieutenant Mora crouched beside him, her face lit by the weapon's flashing fury. "They're unraveling. You're tearing centuries of doctrine apart right here." "That's the point," Hale said, his voice low but edged with satisfaction. "This isn't just a fight. It's a lesson." The battlefield was unrecognizable. What began as a proud advance had devolved into wreckage and corpses. Alien bodies sprawled across churned sand, shields flickering lifeless beside them. Walkers lay broken, their towering silhouettes now twisted heaps of metal. For the first time in recorded history, the Empire's Conquest Legion retreated. Soldiers who once sneered at humans stumbled backward, their chants replaced by cries of terror. But the Empire was vast, and arrogance ran deep. A fresh wave of dropships descended, determined to crush this defiance. Hale heard the whine of engines and felt the tremor of their landing. Reinforcements poured out, more troops, heavier armor, shield-bearers triple-layered. Mora's breath caught. "Marcus, we can't keep this up. That gun's powerful, but there's too many." "We don't need to win the war today," Hale cut in, never slowing his rotation of the crank. "We just need to break their belief that we can't fight back." The next belt rattled empty. Kellen dove forward, sweat streaking his face as he jammed in another. "Locked. Let it rip." The Gatling thundered again. This time, the aliens advanced cautiously, shields raised in overlapping arcs. The strategy slowed their approach, but Hale's gun didn't care. He swept the barrels across the formation, rounds hammering shields until their emitters burned out one by one. When gaps appeared, slugs punched through and shredded the soldiers hiding behind. Varrix screamed into comms. "Forward! Do not falter. Crush these primitives." His desperation was obvious. The commander who once radiated smug superiority now sounded like a man watching his empire's myth crack in real time. Private Kellen barked a laugh over the noise. "For primitives, we're doing a damn good job." Another walker closed in, firing plasma bolts that scorched barricades and set sand ablaze. Hale focused fire on its cockpit, a hailstorm of bullets rattling metal until sparks burst and the machine toppled sideways in flames. The defenders cheered, voices raw and defiant. Mora raised her rifle, blasting down an alien that slipped through the storm. The humans weren't just surviving, they were dominating. Minutes stretched into eternity. The Gatling's barrels glowed with heat, smoke rising from its frame. Hale's arms burned with exertion, but he refused to slow. Each rotation was another line of aliens broken, another reminder that humans didn't need sleek toys to fight like demons. At last, the Empire's advance faltered again. Their forces, shredded and demoralized, began pulling back. The once proud march dissolved into retreat, drop ships scrambling to lift off before the storm reached them. Silence returned gradually, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal and the moans of the wounded. Hale released the crank, letting the barrels slow. He surveyed the battlefield, a graveyard of arrogance. Private Kellen finally broke the silence. His voice was hoarse, awestruck. "Sir, that wasn't a weapon. That was a monster." Hale wiped sweat from his brow, eyes hard. "No. That was a reminder. We've always been monsters when we have to be." Mora met his gaze, her expression fierce. "You just changed everything, Marcus. The Empire won't forget this." He looked toward the horizon, where the retreating ships vanished into the sky. His jaw tightened. "Good. I want them to remember." The chapter ended with the stench of smoke and iron on the wind, and the knowledge that the myth of human weakness had been shattered forever. The battlefield lay hushed, a graveyard of steel and flesh. Smoke drifted low across the sand, curling around ruined walkers and the broken forms of alien soldiers. The Gatling gun stood silent now, barrels cooling, the acrid scent of spent powder clinging to the wind. For the first time in centuries, the Empire's Conquest Legion had retreated, beaten not by plasma cannons or star destroyers, but by brass and grit. Marcus Hale rested his hands on the weapon, his chest rising in controlled breaths. He wasn't celebrating. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the horizon. "They'll be back," he murmured. "The Empire doesn't accept humiliation lightly." Lieutenant Mora approached, brushing dust from her armor. "Then we have time to prepare. You saw them run, Marcus. They were terrified. That buys us something." Private Kellen leaned against the barricade, exhaustion carved into his features, but his grin was wide. Terrified? They looked like kids caught stealing. That storm chewed through them like they'd never trained a day in their lives. Hale turned to him, tone flat but firm. "Don't mistake fear for weakness. Fear makes enemies dangerous. Today was shock. Tomorrow they'll adapt." Mora nodded. "He's right. The Empire isn't stupid. They'll study what happened. They'll find counters." She glanced at the gun, still gleaming faintly in the fading sun. "That means we can't rely on this alone." Before Hale could answer, the comms crackled with static. A new voice, smooth and venomous, cut through. "Commander Varixtal. You think this victory means anything?" His tone dripped with wounded pride. "You wield relics like children playing with fire. But empires don't fall to desperation. We will return, stronger, and when we do, your world will beg for mercy." Hale keyed the channel, his reply steady. "You already made the mistake of thinking we'd beg. Now you've made a bigger one, thinking we'll stop." Varix snarled, static spiking. "Arrogant savage." The channel cut abruptly. Silence lingered. Mora exhaled slowly. "He sounded shaken." "He is," Hale said, eyes narrowing. "That's the crack we drive wider. The myth of their invincibility is broken. Once that spreads, they'll have more to fear than bullets." Kellen straightened, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Hale's gaze swept across the battlefield, over alien corpses and shattered tech. "Soldiers talk. Survivors carry stories. They'll return home and whisper about a weapon they couldn't stop, about humans they couldn't crush. Fear doesn't stay contained. It spreads. And empires built on fear crumble when it turns inward." That night, the survivors gathered around flickering lamps inside the outpost. The walls bore scorch marks, but the atmosphere buzzed with a new energy, defiance. Soldiers who had expected annihilation now spoke with pride, their voices alive with a belief they hadn't felt in years. Kellen recounted the battle for the 10th time, arms waving. You should have seen it. They came in neat little rows like they owned the place. Then the gun roared and bam! Shields popped like soap bubbles. They ran like hell itself was after them. Laughter broke out among the weary defenders. Some slapped each other's backs, others raised tin cups of water in mock toast. Mora allowed the levity for a while, but eventually she raised her voice. Enjoy it tonight, but remember, this was one fight. The war hasn't shifted yet. Tomorrow they'll regroup. The room quieted. Eyes turned toward Hale, as though waiting for him to chart the next course. He stood slowly, his presence commanding without effort. She's right. Today we proved a point. But points don't win wars, strategy does. We can't stay on defense. We need to spread this weapon, replicate its effect, and show the galaxy that humans are not prey. A young corporal spoke hesitantly. Sir, even if we build more, we don't have factories, not like the Empire. How do we stand against fleets? Hale's voice dropped lower, but it carried weight. We don't fight them on their terms. We fight them on ours. They build empires on scale, on control, on fear. We'll give them chaos. We'll strike where they don't expect, cut supply lines, hit garrisons, vanish before they can respond. And every time we strike, we remind them of today. The corporal's doubt shifted into thoughtfulness, then resolve. Heads around the room began to nod. Mora studied him, her brow furrowed. You're talking about turning this into a resistance. A movement. Hale met her eyes. No. A rebellion. The kind they can't stamp out because it's not just about weapons, it's about belief. And tonight, belief is on our side. Far above the desert, aboard the orbiting flagship Imperial Dawn, Commander Varix paced across the command deck. His officers watched in silence, wary of his fury. He slammed a clawed hand onto the console, replaying battle footage again and again. The human's crude device spat endless streams of death, his proud soldiers falling like cattle. It made no sense. A lieutenant approached cautiously. Commander, the High Council demands your report. Varix's mandibles clicked in frustration. What report? That primitives wield relics we cannot counter? That Tal of the Conquest Legion, was driven back. The officer swallowed hard. They already know. Word spreads quickly, sir. Other sectors are whispering. They say the humans are unpredictable. Dangerous. Varix froze. His pride stung, but deeper than that was fear. Fear of how the council would judge failure. He straightened, forcing his voice calm. Then we will silence the whispers. Prepare new divisions. Triple their shields. Deploy shock troopers. The next engagement will erase this embarrassment. Yet in the recesses of his mind, a thought gnawed. What if this was the beginning of something larger? Back on the desert world, dawn painted the horizon red. Hale stood alone near the gun, watching the light touch the wreckage. The battlefield looked different in morning glow, less a scene of carnage, more a monument. Mora joined him quietly. Couldn't sleep. Didn't try, Hale admitted. Too much to plan. Too much to anticipate. She studied him. You carry it all like it's yours alone. You don't have to. His eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. If I don't, who will? Someone has to carry the weight, Mora. Otherwise, the Empire wins by default. For a moment, the only sound was the soft hiss of the wind across sand. Then she said softly, You've already changed more in one day than most in a lifetime. Don't forget that. He didn't reply, but his grip on the gun tightened. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was the beginning of a war where humanity would no longer kneel. And as the sun rose higher, Marcus Hale knew the Empire's retreat was not an ending, but the first spark of rebellion.